Of all of the greenhouse gas emissions across the world, Wales makes up less than 0.1%. China, by contrast, makes up about a third of them. That begs the question, what is the point in Wales going to net zero when it's such a small percent of emissions? There's lots of very good reasons. Let me explain why. As I record this, it is hot. It is unbelievably hot. If you need more evidence of the impact of climate change on Wales and the fact that it's real, take into account the fact that the 10 hottest years we have ever had have all been since 2006. So why should Wales aim for net zero? Well, the first thing is around historical responsibility. We might not be the biggest emitters in a global context right now, but for all of the 1800s and for the early 20th century, the UK was the biggest emitter in the world by miles. We can't sit here and say that we dug the coal that built the world without also taking responsibility for the fact we dug the coal that heated the world. When you look at the figures for Wales, you realise actually our emissions aren't that small even now. Per head, Wales emits more per person than any other part of the UK. And if you look at that in a global context, Wales per person emits 65% more than the global average. It's also worth bearing in mind that although our emissions are lower now than they used to be, a lot of that is because we've offshored them. A lot of the emissions coming from China are to produce the products that we use, but we are still using those products. Even though they're produced abroad and they're not technically Welsh emissions, they are still our responsibility ultimately. We also need to bear in mind the way we impact the climate that no one really talks about. In Wales, we have 12 million chickens. The reason this affects climate change is because of how we feed them. The key food for those chickens is soy, and 78% of soy is imported. According to WWF, 77% of soy coming from abroad comes from heavily deforested areas like the Amazon. So if you don't care about the historical implications, the moral responsibility, look at it from a self-preservation perspective. Cardiff was found to be the 6th most at-risk major city in the world from climate change due to how low it is in comparison to sea level. I've spoken to people within Natural Resources Wales who've said we can defend big population centres like cities. It's the small areas around the Welsh coast which don't have a lot of people in that ultimately are going to have to be surrendered to the ocean in the coming decades because of sea level rise. 90% of Welsh land is farmland. It's managed agriculture. This is some of the most vulnerable land to climate change because it relies on a stable and reliable climate and not having the introduction of new pests and new species and stuff like that. What happens with climate change really matters in this industry, which is 90% of our land. We mustn't let politicians con us into inaction and apathy when it comes to climate change because they have vested interests. An investigation by the organisation DSMOG found that two-thirds of Reform's donations came from fossil fuel producers. This was a very quick look at everything to do with climate change and emissions in Wales. If you want more detail, you can sign up for my newsletter, which is called the Will Hayward Newsletter.